The syndicate tattoo was a black sun. Min-Seo photographed it without touching the body, sent the image to someone Nia would never meet, and had the estate cleared and repacked in under 40 minutes. She stood in the driveway with a single bag that wasn't hers and watched men move through the dark with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this before, erased a place, erased a night, erased all evidence that anything had happened here at all. She thought about her father breathing steadily in a private room somewhere across the city. She thought about her mother, 17 years ago, pulling a boy out of something terrible and asking for nothing. She thought about the unfinished sentence. "And you are." Min-Seo appeared beside her. New location. 40 minutes north. And then what? He looked at her the way he had in the training room, measuring, precise, honest in a way that cost him something. "And then we finish it." The car pulled away. Behind them, the estate disappeared into the tree lane as though it had never existed. Nia watched it go and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years settle quietly into her chest like a key turning in a lock she'd forgotten she had. Then her phone lit up. Unknown number. 3 words in the message box. Final notice, Nia. She knew Cole's lawyer's writing style the way you know the smell of something that once made you sick. Her hands didn't shake this time. She showed Min-Seo the screen.
His jaw tightened.
He found a loophole. Can he use it? Min-Seo was quiet for exactly 1 second too long. Not if we move tonight. They didn't make it 40 minutes north. Min-Seo's phone rang 12 minutes into the drive. He answered it in Korean, listened without speaking, and ended the call in under a minute. Whatever was said drained something from his face that Nia hadn't seen leave it before. "Problem," she said. Not a question. The board called an emergency session. He looked straight ahead. "They know about you. The Mafia board." "Yes." Nia let that sit for a moment. "What do they want?" "What they always want." His voice was flat. "Control. They see you as a liability, a distraction, a weakness they can use against me." He paused. "They have given me 72 hours to remove you from my protection or forfeit my position. And if you forfeit your position?" He turned to look at her then, and she understood without him saying it. In that world, forfeiting your position wasn't a resignation. It was an execution. "So they'll kill you," she said quietly. "They'll try." Nia looked out the window at the city moving past. All those lit windows. All those ordinary lives stacked on top of each other, none of them knowing what moved through their streets at night. "Then we solve Cole in 72 hours, she said. Min-Seo studied her face for a long moment. "You understand what that means. It means we stop being careful." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Not quite fear. "It means," he said slowly, "that I need to tell you everything." He told her everything in a safe house above a dry cleaning shop that smelled like steam and silence. The syndicate had been hunting Min-Seo for 8 months, not to kill him, but to own him. They had tried money. They had tried threats. Now they were trying Nia, using her existence in his life as evidence that he had gone soft, that his judgment was compromised, that the most feared man in the organization had developed the one vulnerability that made him mortal. A person he wouldn't sacrifice. When he finished talking, he slid a bag across the table.
Thick. Packed.
The kind of bag that meant don't look back. "There is a flight at 4 a.m., he said. "New identity. New city. Your father's medical care transferred and fully funded for the next 20 years. He looked at the bag, nodded at her. "You walk out of this, and you never hear Cole's name again. You never hear mine."
Nia looked at the bag.
She thought about 3 years of shrinking herself to fit inside Cole's idea of who she should be. She thought about learned helplessness. That was what the therapist had called it once before Cole had canceled that too. She thought about the wall of red lines in the training room. She pushed the bag back across the table. "I'm not leaving." Min-Seo looked up. "Then understand," he said quietly, "that after tonight, there is no version of this that ends safely." Nia met his eyes. There never was. The poker game was held on the 14th floor of a building that didn't advertise its existence. No sign. No doorman. Just a freight elevator that required a key card and a willingness to be searched twice before you reach the top. Min-Seo had the key card. Nia had the dress, black, architectural, the kind that made people look at her face last. That was the point. The ledger they needed was in the possession of a man named Reston, Cole's primary financial architect, the one who had built every shell company, signed every proxy, buried every body in the paperwork. He came to this game every Thursday. He always drank too much by the second hour. And he kept everything on an encrypted drive that never left his jacket pocket.
Nia's job was the drive.
Min-Seo's job was the room. "You have 20 minutes from the moment we walk in," he said in the elevator. "After that, Reston's security rotates." "I know. If anything feels wrong." "I know," she said again. The elevator opened. The room was loud and dim and thick with the particular arrogance of men who had never been told no by anything except bad luck. Nia walked in ahead of Min-Seo and felt every eye in the room recalibrate. She found Reston in 4 minutes. Drunk enough. Distracted enough. She sat down across from him and smiled the smile Cole had taught her. The one designed to make men feel chosen. Tonight, she was using it to destroy everything Cole had built. She had the drive in her hand at the 17-minute mark. Reston hadn't even felt it leave his pocket. He was laughing at something the man beside him had said, his third whiskey disappearing faster than his judgment, and Nia had simply leaned across the table to collect her chips, and the drive had moved from his jacket to her palm like it had always belonged there. 16 seconds later, Cole Vance sat down in the empty chair to her left. She didn't flinch. She had promised herself she wouldn't flinch. "Funny place to find you," he said pleasantly. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man holding all the cards, which meant he thought he was. "Min-Seo send you to do his errands?" "I'm here alone," she said. "I know." He smiled. "That's why I'm here." He slid a document across the felt. She recognized the letterhead without picking it up, his lawyer's. The loophole. 3 clauses buried inside the original NDA she had signed 3 years ago, exhausted and desperate and trusting, that gave Cole legal guardianship over her father's medical decisions in the event of her voluntary abandonment of the engagement. "You left me publicly," he said softly. "That's abandonment, Nia. My lawyers filed this morning." Her father. Again. Always her father. "You have until midnight to come back," Cole said. "Or I pull the plug myself." He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the exit. He didn't see Min-Seo standing directly behind him.
Cole felt him before he saw him.
That was the thing about Park Min-Seo that no one who had encountered him ever forgot. He didn't announce himself with sound or movement. He announced himself with a change in the air, a drop in temperature, a primal instinct in the back of the skull that said something dangerous is behind you. Cole turned slowly. Min-Seo stood close enough that a whisper would carry. He had a glass of water in his hand. He looked completely unbothered, which was the most terrifying thing about him. The entire table had gone quiet. The guardianship clause, Min-Seo said, was written into an NDA that was signed under financial duress, witnessed by a notary your firm owns, and filed through a shell company that ceased to exist at 11:47 this evening. He took a small sip of water. "Your lawyers will find out in approximately 4 minutes." Cole's face went through several colors. "You can't." "I already did." Min-Seo set the glass down with a precision that somehow carried more menace than violence. "The loophole is closed, Cole. Your investors have been contacted. Your proxies have been served." He tilted his head slightly. "You came here tonight thinking she was alone." Cole looked at Nia, then back at Min-Seo. "She was never alone," Min-Seo said quietly. The room watched Cole Vance understand, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be the least powerful person in a room. He reached for his phone. It was already dead. Nia plugged the drive into the tablet Min-Seo had placed on the table without a word. It took 11 seconds to decrypt. She had watched him do it in the training room 40 times until her fingers knew the sequence, without her mind having to follow. The ledger opened. It was everything. Every offshore account, every falsified contract, every bribed official, Every leveraged debt weaponized against people who had no way to fight back. 17 companies. For countries. One man's name buried at the center of all of it like a spider that had spent 20 years building a web it believed was invisible. Nia started moving files. The first transfer notification went to the Securities Exchange Commission. The second to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The third to a journalist, not one of Cole's, who had been waiting 18 months for exactly this package, whose editor had already cleared the story, whose publication went live the moment the files hit the server. Cole's phone was dead, but the screens around the room weren't. One by one, the televisions mounted above the bar began cycling through breaking news alerts. Vance Industries under federal investigation. 17 shell companies dissolved. Arrest warrant issued. Cole stood in the center of the room and watched his empire collapse in real time the way he had once watched Nia collapse beside a ruined cake. Except no one in this room was looking away. Every eye was on him. Nia closed the tablet. That's the ledger, Cole. She looked up at him. Every debt. Every name. Every body you buried in the paperwork.
She stood.
Consider them exhumed. Cole moved fast for a man whose world had just ended. He crossed the room in 6 steps, grabbed Nia's wrist with both hands, and pulled her in front of him like a shield, the last instinct of a man who had spent his entire life using people as protection from consequences. Get back, he said to the room. To Min-Seo. To everyone. His voice had lost its pleasantness completely. What was underneath wasn't rage. It was something smaller and uglier. Pure, cornered fear. I will hurt her. I have done it before, and I will. Let go of her wrist. Min-Seo's voice was the same volume it always was. The same temperature. The same absolute stillness that had frozen a ballroom full of people 3 weeks ago. Cole's grip tightened. You don't scare me. I know, Min-Seo said. She does. Cole faltered. His eyes moved to Nia. She was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face in 3 years. Not fear, not pleading, not the careful blankness she had worn to survive him. She was looking at him the way you look at something you have already finished with. She brought her elbow back into his ribs with everything she had. Cole's grip broke.
He staggered.
The doors opened. 4 federal agents walked in with badges raised and a warrant that had Cole's full legal name on every single line. He looked at Nia. You did this. We did this, she said. There's a difference. They took him through the same doors he had once tried to throw her out of. She watched him go and felt nothing except the extraordinary lightness of a cage finally, completely open. They drove north without speaking. Not the tense silence of the first night. This was different. Settled. The silence of 2 people who had stopped performing for each other and found something quieter and more permanent underneath. Min-Seo pulled off the main road at a point where the city finally gave up trying and the dark became genuine dark. Trees and water, and sky uninterrupted by anything built by people with bad intentions. He stopped the car. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Nia waited. The syndicate accepted my resignation 3 hours ago. He looked straight ahead. In exchange for my full withdrawal from all operations and the transfer of certain assets, they have agreed to consider me dead.
He paused.
Officially and permanently. She understood what that meant. You're disappearing. Park Min-Seo is disappearing, he said carefully. The man sitting in this car is still deciding who he is. The water outside the window caught the moonlight and held it. Nia thought about her mother, pulling a broken boy out of darkness 17 years ago and seeing something in him worth saving. She thought about the blood oath. She thought about the unfinished sentence that had been sitting between them for days. And you never finished it, she said quietly. In the corridor. You said because he is yours, and you stopped. Min-Seo was silent for a long moment. I stopped, he said, because the rest of it frightened me. He turned to look at her. Say it now, she said. 6 months later, the house sat at the edge of the sea. Small. Unremarkable from the outside. The kind of place that didn't invite curiosity, which was exactly why they had chosen it. A white gate. A garden that Nia was slowly learning to keep alive. A kitchen that smelled permanently of ginger and sesame and something she had stopped trying to name because some things were better lived in than understood. Her father had visited twice. The second time he had stayed for 3 weeks, sitting on the porch in the mornings with a man he called simply the Quiet One, the two of them drinking tea and watching the water with the comfortable wordlessness of people who understood each other, without requiring explanation. Nia's foundation had its first board meeting on a Tuesday in March. 7 people around a table. A mandate to fund medical care for families who had no coal vans to threaten them and no Min-Seo to intervene. She had chaired it herself and spoken for 40 minutes, without once shrinking. The man who was no longer Park Min-Seo sat in the back row and said nothing and watched her with an expression she had learned to read over 6 months of mornings and silences and honest conversations in the dark. It was the same expression her mother had in that photograph. "I see exactly what you are." Afterward, walking home along the water, he took her hand. Not dramatically. Not as a declaration. Simply as a man who had spent his entire life moving through the world without touching anything, finally deciding that some things were worth holding on to. "You finished the sentence," she said. "6 months ago," he said. "In the car. You just weren't ready to hear it." She laughed. Genuinely. The kind that came from somewhere unguarded. "Say it now," she said. Same words as before. He stopped walking, turned to face her with the sea behind him and the last of the evening light catching the edges of everything. "You are the reason I stopped," he said simply. "The reason I wanted to." The water moved. The light held. And for the first time in both their lives, there was nowhere else to be. If you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching, for staying, for caring about Nia and Min-Seo the way you have. Drop a comment below and tell me what this story meant to you. And if you want more stories like this one, head over to Julia's Romance Library. There are more waiting for you there. Subscribe so you never miss a single one. These stories exist because you choose to listen. And I will never stop being grateful for that.